There are roughly 7 billion people on this planet, and at some point, about half of them have walked into a cafe, looked around, and thought the exact same thing: I could do this. And the math seems to agree with them, because a latte costs about $1.25 to make and sells for $5, which means every single cup is a 72% profit margin, and if you sell 200 of those a day, that's $1,000 before lunch. $365,000 a year from a business that basically runs on beans, milk, and good vibes. The startup costs are surprisingly gentle compared to most businesses, somewhere between $80,000 and $150,000 for a nice little corner spot with exposed brick and big windows. And the remote work boom means there are more people than ever looking for a cozy place to park their laptop, which means your cafe isn't just a coffee shop. It's a third place, a community hub, a daily ritual for hundreds of people who will pay you $5 every single morning for the privilege of feeling like they belong somewhere. A writer for Slate once described the cafe dream as cutting deeper than any other capitalist urge, all the way back to childhood tea sets. And when he wrote about his own experience trying it, he received 500 emails from people who had the exact same fantasy, which tells you everything about how deep this impulse runs and absolutely nothing about whether it actually works. But here's a number that doesn't get mentioned in the fantasy version. 60% of independent coffee shops close within 5 years, and about 30% don't survive year one. And the strangest part is that 99% of those closures have nothing to do with the quality of the coffee, because the coffee is almost always fine, the latte art is beautiful, the playlist is perfect, and the shop still goes under. The reason is hiding inside that 72% margin, because that number is technically real but functionally a lie. It only counts the cost of beans, milk, and the cup, and it conveniently forgets that someone has to stand there and make the drink for $17 to $20 an hour. And someone has to pay rent on the space where the drink gets made, and that rent in any location worth having runs $4,000 to $8,000 a month before you even factor in insurance, utilities, equipment maintenance, and the slow bleed of waste and spoilage that nobody budgets for. By the time you subtract all of that from your 72%, you're left with a net profit margin that the industry puts somewhere between 2.5% and 7%, which means that gorgeous latte you sold for $5 just earned the business somewhere between 12 and 35 cents in actual profit. And if you need a moment to sit with that number, you're starting to understand why cafe owners look tired. So let's do the math that nobody does before they sign a lease. The average independent cafe owner in the United States takes home $44,347 a year, according to ZipRecruiter's 2026 data, and most land between $33,000 and $46,000. That sounds like a living until you realize that most cafe owners work 60 to 80 hours a week, which means at 70 hours, that $44,000 salary works out to about $12 an hour, which is less than what their baristas make. The owner poured $150,000 into a build-out, spent 6 months getting permits, negotiated a lease that locks them into 5 years of payments, and they are now earning less per hour than the 20-year-old behind the counter who showed up with a resume and an Instagram account. And the reason this happens is that a cafe is not actually a coffee business. It's a real estate arbitrage operation that the owner doesn't realize they're running. You are paying $6,000 a month to rent a space, spending $150,000 to fill it with beautiful equipment and furniture, creating an atmosphere that makes the entire block more desirable. And the person who captures the financial value of all that work is your landlord. Because when your cafe makes the neighborhood trendy, commercial rents go up, property values appreciate, and the landlord's asset grows, while you, the person who created all that value, are locked into a lease that gets more expensive every year through built-in escalation clauses. You are essentially an unpaid interior designer and atmosphere consultant for someone else's real estate portfolio, and your payment for this service is the privilege of waking up at 4:30 in the morning to make coffee for $12 an hour. The shops that have the best margins in the entire industry are the ones where the owner bought the building. Because once you remove the landlord from the equation, a cafe actually works. The mortgage payment is often less than rent, you're building equity instead of enriching someone else, and you've eliminated the single biggest expense that kills independent shops. But of course, buying commercial real estate requires a completely different level of capital, which means the cafe dream is only financially rational for people who are already wealthy enough to not need the cafe dream. And if you think the landlord is the only one profiting more than the cafe owner, you haven't looked at the supply chain yet. Wholesale coffee roasters take roughly 67% of the gross margin on every pound of coffee a cafe purchases, which means the roaster is making more from your business than you are, and they're doing it without paying rent, without managing employees who call in sick on Saturday morning, and without cleaning a single bathroom. The most successful independent coffee brands in the country figured this out and essentially reversed the model. Verve Coffee Roasters started with a single 900 square foot shop in Santa Cruz and didn't open a second location for 5 years because they realized the retail cafe was the marketing department, not the business. The business was wholesale roasting, direct trade relationships, and e-commerce. And the cafe existed to make people fall in love with the brand so they'd buy the beans online. And this is the pattern everywhere you look. The cafes that survive long enough to actually make their owners real money almost always stop being cafes. They become event venues that serve coffee, or co-working spaces that happen to have an espresso machine, or merchandise brands where the physical shop is a showroom. The coffee is a loss leader for something else entirely, which means the fantasy of making a living by simply making great coffee and creating a warm space is exactly backwards. You make a living by building a business that uses coffee and warm spaces as customer acquisition tools for higher margin revenue streams that have nothing to do with what's in the cup. So is it worth it? And the answer is that the cafe dream is worth having but not worth funding, at least not the way most people fund it. If you're taking out an SBA loan for $150,000 to open a single location cafe in a rented space in 2026, while Arabica futures are sitting near all-time highs, and the entire U.S. coffee market is decelerating into maturity, you are making one of the worst risk-adjusted financial decisions available to a small business owner in America today. And I say that with genuine respect for the dream, because the dream is beautiful and the business is brutal, and those two things can both be true at the same time. The people who should open a cafe are the ones who already own the building, or the ones who have enough capital to survive 3 years of losses while building a wholesale or e-commerce brand that the cafe supports, or the ones who are doing it for reasons that have absolutely nothing to do with money, and have made peace with earning $12 an hour in exchange for the life they want to live. That last group is real, and they're not delusional. They've just done the math and decided the math isn't the point, and there's something genuinely admirable about that. As long as they walked in with their eyes open and not with a spreadsheet that says 72% margin at the top and has nothing underneath it.